Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. How did a top-secret project change the world forever? That's the question at the heart of one of the most dramatic and consequential chapters in human history. The Manhattan Project wasn't just a scientific endeavor. It was a race against time, a gamble on physics, and a secret mission wrapped in layers of espionage, politics, and moral complexity. Born out of fear that Nazi Germany might develop a nuclear weapon first, the project united brilliant minds from around the world in the isolated deserts of New Mexico and the depths of hidden laboratories. The result was both awe-inspiring and terrifying: the successful creation of the atomic bomb. In this video, we'll peel back the layers of this colossal undertaking, from Albert Einstein's warning letter and the recruitment of top scientists, to the cloak and dagger world of spies embedded in the program. We'll explore the breakthrough science, the decisions that led to destruction, and the ethical questions that continue to haunt us today. Stay with us as we unravel the story of the Manhattan Project, where genius met fear, and the future was rewritten in fire. The Manhattan Project began not with explosions or secret laboratories, but with a letter, one that carried the weight of a world on the brink. In 1939, as Nazi Germany marched across Europe and reports emerged that German scientists were exploring the power of nuclear fission, a sense of urgency gripped a small group of physicists. Among them were Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard, both refugees from fascist regimes who understood the terrifying potential of splitting the atom. Szilard, convinced that Hitler's regime could weaponize this science, drafted a letter with Einstein's help, warning President Franklin D. Roosevelt that a new kind of bomb, one of unprecedented power, was theoretically possible. Einstein's signature on the letter to President Roosevelt was more than just a name. It was a signal flare from the scientific world to the political one. Einstein was already world-renowned, a symbol of genius and credibility. So when he warned, with Szillard's insight behind him, that Nazi Germany might harness the power of the atom, it was impossible to ignore. The letter wasn't filled with technical blueprints. It was filled with possibility, urgency, and fear. It told Roosevelt that nuclear fission wasn't just a lab curiosity. It could be turned into a weapon more powerful than anything humanity had ever seen. Roosevelt, though, cautious by nature, understood what was at stake. The memory of World War I was still fresh, and now a new global war was stirring. The idea that Hitler, a dictator already proving ruthless and expansive, could possess a superweapon was chilling. So, while he didn't greenlight a massive project right away, he did what seemed reasonable at the time. He created the Advisory Committee on Uranium. It was small, exploratory, and focused on investigating the science. But even in its infancy, this committee represented a shift. It showed the U.S. was beginning to think about war not just in terms of tanks and soldiers, but in terms of equations, elements, and energies that no military had yet wielded. This cautious beginning would snowball quickly. As the science progressed and the war escalated, so too did the urgency and the resources poured into the Manhattan Project. What began as a theoretical fear became a very real race, not to dominate, but to prevent catastrophe. It was the first time in history that an entire government mobilized science on such a scale for the purpose of sheer survival. And in doing so, the Manhattan Project would permanently change how the world viewed science, not as a neutral pursuit of truth, but as a tool that could tip the balance between victory and annihilation. The story of the Manhattan Project is, at its heart, a fusion of genius and urgency. As the project expanded beyond the Advisory Committee, it drew in some of the brightest minds in physics, figures who, under different circumstances, might have spent their lives unraveling the mysteries of the universe in quiet classrooms and lecture halls. But war doesn't wait. Scientists like J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, and Niels Bohr found themselves at the center of a secretive and morally complex mission: to weaponize the atom before the Nazis could. J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist with a deep knowledge of quantum mechanics and a poetic mind, became the scientific director of the project. His leadership helped bring together a constellation of talent, transforming Los Alamos, New Mexico, into the intellectual heart of the Manhattan Project. There, in an isolated, militarized desert town, physicists, chemists, and engineers collaborated under the tightest of security. It was an environment charged with ambition, fear, and pressure. The stakes were not just military, but existential. Meanwhile, other sites across the country played vital roles. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, became the center for uranium enrichment. Its sprawling facilities, powered by immense amounts of electricity, worked to separate the rare uranium-235 isotope from its more common counterpart. At the Hanford site in Washington, scientists developed the technology to produce plutonium-239 in nuclear reactors, a different path to a bomb. Together, these locations formed a nationwide web of research, engineering, and industrial might, all cloaked in secrecy so intense that many workers didn't even know what they were building. At the heart of it all was the science of nuclear fission. In simple terms, fission occurs when the nucleus of a heavy atom, like uranium-235 or plutonium-239, is split, releasing a vast amount of energy and more neutrons. If managed correctly, this reaction could be sustained in a chain, releasing enough energy in a fraction of a second to level entire cities. Understanding this process wasn't just about physics. It was about figuring out how to initiate it, precisely and safely under unimaginable conditions. The secrecy was total. Codenames, compartmentalization, and surveillance were everywhere. Scientists operated on a need-to-know basis, their mail censored, their movements restricted. Even Oppenheimer was under quiet suspicion by the government due to his past political affiliations. The intense pressure to succeed was matched only by the moral unease growing in the minds of many involved. They knew they were building something that had never existed before, a weapon that could end a war or redefine what it meant to wage one. This collision reshaped the identity of science itself. No longer confined to the theoretical or academic, science became a central instrument of national security, harnessed for the purpose of survival in a world teetering on the edge of catastrophe. The Manhattan Project transformed laboratories into war rooms and physicists into warriors of a new kind, ones whose weapons were equations and particles instead of bullets and tanks. For many of the scientists involved, this transformation was both thrilling and deeply unsettling. They were working under impossible pressure, surrounded by the knowledge that failure could mean Nazi Germany winning the war. But success meant opening a Pandora's box that could never be closed. Every breakthrough, every test, every refinement of the bomb's design carried with it a haunting question. What kind of world would this invention create? And so, science meets war became more than a motto. It became a moral dilemma etched into the heart of modern history. The Manhattan Project was not just a technological feat. It was a moment when humanity's greatest intellectual triumph was inextricably linked to its capacity for destruction. The Manhattan Project was cloaked in layers of secrecy, but even the thickest veils couldn't completely block out espionage. Inside the heart of this top-secret operation, among scientists, soldiers, and technicians sworn to silence, worked Soviet spies who quietly funneled some of the 20th century's most dangerous secrets across enemy lines. Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant physicist and one of the most trusted minds in the project, was in fact a Soviet agent. He provided detailed information about the bomb's design and mechanics to Moscow, giving the USSR a critical head start in their own atomic program. To protect the bomb's development, the US employed strict security protocols. Code names were assigned to nearly everything. The cities, Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, Hanford, didn't appear on maps. Real names were replaced with initials or aliases in internal documents. Workers were compartmentalized. Few knew the true purpose of what they were building. Mail was censored, phone calls monitored, and even family members were kept in the dark. The FBI and military intelligence kept close watch for leaks, but they underestimated how deeply Soviet intelligence had already infiltrated the program. Despite these efforts, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb just 4 years after Hiroshima, far sooner than the Americans expected. It was a shocking reminder that in a world where knowledge equals power, secrets don't stay secret for long. The Manhattan Project wasn't just a race to beat the Nazis, it was the opening chapter of the Cold War, where espionage became as powerful as any weapon in shaping global power. In the pre-dawn hours of July 16, 1945, deep in the New Mexico desert, the world entered the atomic age. Scientists, military officials, and engineers gathered at the remote test site known as Trinity, where they would witness the detonation of the first nuclear device, an event that would forever change warfare, geopolitics, and human history. The bomb, codenamed Gadget, was hoisted atop a 100-foot tower, wired with sensors, and surrounded by observation bunkers miles away. At exactly 5:29 a.m., the countdown reached 0. In an instant, night turned to day. The explosion unleashed a fireball brighter than the sun, rising into the sky in a towering mushroom cloud. The desert shook as a shockwave rolled outward, shattering windows over 100 miles away. Scientists who had worked for years to harness the power of the atom now stood in stunned silence. The theoretical had become terrifyingly real. The moment following the Trinity test was not marked by unanimous celebration, but by a profound reckoning. The explosion itself was a spectacle of human ingenuity, centuries of physics, chemistry, and engineering distilled into a single, blinding instant. But the elation of scientific success was quickly eclipsed by the gravity of what that success meant. This was no ordinary bomb. This was power on a cosmic scale, and the people who had created it suddenly understood they had crossed a threshold from which humanity could never return. J. Robert Oppenheimer's invocation of the Bhagavad Gita, "Now, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," was not just poetic. It was an expression of existential dread. He and his colleagues had torn open the fabric of nature and now stood at the edge of a future they could not fully control. For some, the bomb was a necessary evil, justified by the urgency to defeat fascism and save lives by ending the war swiftly. But for others, it sparked a deep moral unease. Had they simply swapped one horror for another? The Trinity test didn't just prove the bomb would work. It forced everyone involved to confront the fact that science had given humanity the power to destroy itself. This moment crystallized the paradox at the heart of the Manhattan Project: that the same minds capable of unlocking nature's secrets were also now responsible for unleashing its darkest consequences. And while political leaders saw a new tool of war, many of the scientists saw a Pandora's box that could never be closed. The emotional weight of that morning echoed far beyond the desert sands of New Mexico. It set the tone for the nuclear age, a world balanced precariously between innovation and annihilation, brilliance and devastation. As the Manhattan Project neared completion, the sense of urgency that had once united its architects began to fracture under the weight of a profound moral dilemma. Scientists who had once worked tirelessly to beat Nazi Germany to the bomb now found themselves asking an unsettling question: should we actually use it? Germany had already surrendered by May 1945, and the enemy that remained, Japan, was battered and struggling, though still refusing to surrender. The rationale for dropping the atomic bomb was shifting from survival to strategy. Some scientists, like Leo Szilard and a group of Manhattan Project colleagues, petitioned the U.S. government to reconsider. They argued that using such a weapon, without first offering a chance for surrender, would set a dangerous precedent for the future of warfare and humanity. They feared the bomb would not only kill thousands of civilians, but also inaugurate a terrifying new arms race. Others, including political and military leaders, saw it differently. For them, the priority was ending the war quickly and decisively. A land invasion of Japan was expected to result in potentially hundreds of thousands of American casualties, and the bomb offered a way to avoid that. President Truman, newly in office after Roosevelt's death, made the final call. On August 6 and 9, 1945, the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was unprecedented. Over 200,000 people, many of them civilians, died from the immediate blasts and radiation exposure in the following weeks and months. For the survivors, known as hibakusha, life was never the same. For the scientists who had made the bomb possible, many were left with a lasting sense of guilt and unease. The moral dilemma surrounding the atomic bomb extended far beyond the immediate aftermath of its use in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The decision to unleash such a weapon wasn't merely a tactical choice. It was an ethical crossroads, where the future of humanity was pitted against the pragmatism of military strategy. The bomb's creation and its use in war raised fundamental questions about the role of science in society and the responsibilities of those who wield technological power. For the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project, many of whom had been motivated by the fear that Nazi Germany would develop a nuclear weapon first, the use of the bomb on civilians was a bitter pill to swallow. Some, like J. Robert Oppenheimer, were haunted by their creations, grappling with the knowledge that they had brought into being a weapon capable of wiping out entire cities. Others, like Leo Szilard, believed that the bomb should not be used, without a thorough effort to explore diplomatic options first. But once the bombs had been dropped, it was clear that the ethical consequences of their actions would be felt for generations. The moral debate centers on whether the bomb was truly necessary. The argument that the bomb saved lives by hastening Japan's surrender is often cited in defense of its use. Proponents argue that an invasion of Japan would have been devastating, both in terms of American casualties and the suffering of Japanese civilians. By dropping the bombs, they say, the United States avoided a prolonged and bloody conflict. However, this view has been questioned by historians who suggest that Japan was already on the brink of surrender, and that the use of the atomic bomb was as much a political move, intended to assert U.S. dominance in the post-war world, as a military necessity. On the other side of the argument, critics assert that the bomb's use was a morally indefensible act, regardless of the strategic rationale. The bomb's immediate and long-term effects on the civilian populations of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, death, suffering, and generational trauma, cannot be justified by any military gain. They argue that the weapon was not only a violation of the laws of war, but also a signal that the rules of warfare had changed irreversibly, moving from tactical consideration to a dangerous new form of power. What makes this dilemma even more profound is that the bomb's creation and use signaled the birth of an era in which science could no longer be viewed purely as a tool for progress. The development of nuclear weapons forced society to confront the potential consequences of scientific knowledge being used in ways that could bring about not just victory in war, but the annihilation of entire populations. Scientists found themselves at the center of this ethical debate, forced to ask if they should pursue innovation without considering the long-term consequences of their discoveries. The bomb's legacy is thus not just about military strategy or international politics. It is about the responsibility of those who create technologies that have the potential to fundamentally alter the course of history. The world now lived in the shadow of nuclear weapons, where the balance of power was dictated by the threat of annihilation rather than the hope of progress. This reality has shaped global diplomacy ever since, with the threat of nuclear war looming over international relations and affecting political decisions in ways that have, at times, been both stabilizing and terrifying. The moral questions surrounding the atomic bomb continue to reverberate in the ethical dilemmas faced by scientists, policymakers, and leaders today. As technology advances at an unprecedented rate, especially in fields like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and cybersecurity, the lessons of the atomic bomb remain relevant. The question of whether humanity can harness such powerful knowledge without losing its moral compass is a struggle that transcends history. The creation of the atomic bomb reminded us that with great power comes not just the ability to shape the world, but the responsibility to consider the consequences of that power on future generations. The aftermath of the Manhattan Project and the use of nuclear weapons set the stage for a new chapter in global politics, one dominated by the fear of nuclear annihilation. While World War II had officially ended in 1945, the atomic bomb's legacy began the moment it was dropped, influencing not only the future of warfare, but also the very fabric of international relations, science, and ethics. The immediate consequence of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was the beginning of the Cold War, a tense geopolitical rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both nations, now armed with nuclear capabilities, entered into an arms race that would define much of the second half of the 20th century. The Soviet Union, determined not to be left behind, successfully tested its own nuclear bomb in 1949, and the stage was set for an ideological, military, and technological contest between two superpowers. The threat of mutually assured destruction became the cornerstone of this tense era, where the possibility of nuclear war hung over the world like an ever-present specter. The nuclear arms race led to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, as both superpowers stockpiled nuclear warheads at an alarming rate. The Cold War was marked by numerous proxy wars, espionage, and a constant fear of escalation into full-scale nuclear conflict. During this time, many nations also sought to develop their own nuclear programs, further raising concerns about the spread of nuclear weapons. This new phase of global politics forced the international community to grapple with the ethical, strategic, and existential dangers posed by the proliferation of nuclear arms. In parallel to the militarization of nuclear energy, the peaceful use of atomic energy began to be promoted as a means to power the future. The belief that nuclear power could provide nearly limitless energy led to the establishment of nuclear power plants worldwide. Yet, the promise of abundant, cheap energy was tempered by the dangers inherent in the technology, highlighted by disasters like the 1979 Three Mile Island accident and the 1986 Chernobyl meltdown. These events underscored the inherent risks of harnessing such powerful forces and reminded the world of the delicate balance between scientific progress and the need for caution in applying powerful technologies. The Manhattan Project, initially conceived to prevent Nazi Germany from acquiring nuclear weapons, set in motion a new era where nuclear weapons became central to national security strategies. While the fear of a nuclear war between the superpowers loomed large, the technological advancements made possible by the project also led to breakthroughs in other fields of science. Nuclear physics, in particular, expanded into medical treatments, space exploration, and other scientific endeavors. Yet, the legacy of the Manhattan Project remains deeply ambivalent. It gave humanity the ability to destroy itself, but also provided the foundation for a range of scientific advances that have shaped the modern world. One of the most significant aspects of the legacy of the Manhattan Project is the rise of arms, control, and non-proliferation efforts. The global community recognized that the very existence of nuclear weapons posed an existential threat to all of humanity. As the years went on, efforts like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, in 1968, sought to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and promote peaceful nuclear cooperation. Despite these efforts, the risk of nuclear conflict has remained a central concern in global politics, with ongoing negotiations, treaties, and tensions surrounding the issue of nuclear proliferation. The Manhattan Project not only changed warfare and international relations, it fundamentally altered the way science was perceived and applied. It was no longer just a field of discovery and knowledge, it was a tool that could shape the destiny of humanity. Scientists, once seen as neutral and disinterested in political affairs, were now at the heart of the geopolitical landscape, tasked with controlling forces that could destroy entire civilizations. The ethical challenges that arose from the creation of the atomic bomb prompted a reevaluation of the role of science and technology in society, and the responsibility of scientists to consider the consequences of their work. In the years since the Manhattan Project, the world has been forced to confront the dual nature of scientific progress. It can bring about incredible advances, but it can also lead to unprecedented destruction. The legacy of the atomic bomb is a reminder of the immense power science can wield and the responsibility that comes with such power. As we move forward into an increasingly complex and interconnected world, the lessons of the Manhattan Project remain ever relevant, reminding us of the need for careful thought, ethical responsibility, and vigilance in our use of science and technology. The Manhattan Project represents one of the most profound collisions of secrecy, science, and war in human history. What began in hidden laboratories and fenced-off desert towns culminated in explosions so powerful they reshaped the destiny of nations and forever altered humanity's relationship with power itself. Secrecy had been essential, wrapping the efforts in layers of deception to prevent enemy spies from learning the truth. Science, once a pursuit of pure knowledge, had become a weaponized force, directed not merely toward discovery but toward decisive victory. War had provided the urgency, the desperate need that turned theoretical physics into an existential arms race. When the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, the world crossed an invisible line. The ancient barriers of distance and geography that once provided security were rendered meaningless. Humanity had unleashed a force capable of annihilation on a scale previously reserved for nightmares and religious apocalypse. From that moment forward, no war, no peace, no political calculation could ignore the looming presence of nuclear weapons. The global order itself was transformed, based now on a careful balance of fear, alliances, and the haunting knowledge that total destruction could be decided in minutes. In reflecting on the legacy of the Manhattan Project, we are left with a troubling, open-ended question: can humanity control its own power? The story of the bomb is not just about technological triumph or military necessity. It is about the human heart, our capacity for invention, our drive for dominance, and our struggle with the moral consequences of our actions. The atom was split, but so too was our sense of innocence about the possibilities of science. The Cold War, arms control treaties, nuclear energy debates, and even today's geopolitical tensions are all echoes of that first detonation in the WWII desert. Each generation inherits not just the achievements of the past, but its responsibilities and dangers as well. In the end, the Manhattan Project stands as both a testament to human genius and a stark warning. The power we create can either secure our future or end it. How we choose to wield it remains one of the central questions of our time.